Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. Got you covered. Traditional leagues, Dynasty League, PPR League, IDP League, even Daily Fantasy Football League. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Welcome to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. This episode is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network, And as always, I'm your host, Jesse Tapia. And for today's show, we're going to be doing winners and losers, how we've been doing the last few weeks from week 13, I think it was, or was it week 14 that I just played? I think it was week 14. Yeah, so from week 14, we'll talk about the Thursday night game between the Colts and Broncos, talk about who to start, who not to start, and also talk a little bit about the game. And then, let's see, we'll talk about Aaron Rodgers, Alvin Kamara coming back this week from his concussion, then Rodgers coming back from his collarbone injury, whether or not to start them, and talk about who I like going this week, who I don't like, and then last segment, how we always do, we'll do who to start and who to sit, and then pretty much anything else that comes to mind when it comes to the good old fantasy football. But everyone by now should be in playoffs. I mean, I'm starting in one of my leagues, starting my playoff run. 4 teams make playoffs in that league, and it's pretty much semifinals from here. Obviously, whoever wins makes it to the championship. Winner wins all the money that we put in. And then same with my other league right now. I'm in the semifinals. Won my first week of playoffs last week. When that went 160 to 130, I think, something around there. And then play the number one guy this week, and then hopefully I win this week so I can play in the championship next week. So it's looking pretty interesting right now. But hopefully everything works out. But I mean, fantasy football to me is just something that's always been weird. Sometimes I love it. Sometimes I can't stand it. Sometimes this is my last year playing fantasy football, and sometimes I'm going to play fantasy football forever. Last year was one of those years where I was like, I'm done playing fantasy football. That's that. I'm done. And then this year I'm like, you know what? I'll play in your league. I'll play in your league too. And now it's like, I'll be back next year. So fantasy football, I got like a love-hate relationship with it. Can't really stand it sometimes, but also love it. So if I lose this week, probably just not going to be able to stand it. Going to hate it for a little bit. And then obviously, when people come asking, you want to go play in the league, or even my friends asking, are you going to start a league or whatever, I'm probably going to do it. Why? Because it's fantasy football. It's just how it is. It's like the NFL on Thursday night. We don't like it. All right, they'll give us the Broncos and the Colts on Thursday night. We'll complain about it. We'll say how much we hate it. But in reality, we're going to be there watching it. And that's pretty much how fantasy football is now. But I know daily fantasy and all that stuff is starting to take over a little bit. So, I mean, not too many people playing with their friends in leagues. It's more of like I said, just the daily fantasy type of things. I tried daily fantasy a couple of times, and it's dangerous. I'll tell you that much. It is dangerous. Okay, you go in, all right, you're like, put in $5, $10 or whatever. You do that. You start picking your players. You win a little bit. Like, this is easy. You can do this, and then you just keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going. Luckily, I never really got into that or anything like that. So, daily fantasy is kind of dangerous, but it's fun nonetheless. So, let's get into these winners and losers though for week 14. Let's start with the Thursday night game between the Saints and the Falcons. And as soon as this loads up right here, let's see for New Orleans. Let's go over winners right here. Is Drew Brees a winner? Let's see. Man, this is taking forever right now. So Drew Brees right here, right? He had 271 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. I'll consider that a winner right there. Mark Ingram, let's see. He had, me do math, 92 yards total, but no touchdowns, so I'm not going to consider that a winner. Michael Thomas, that's a winner right there. 10 receptions, 117 yards, 1 touchdown. Alvin Kamara, we'll talk a little bit about him later on in the show, but for this game, he's a loser. He came out of the game injured with a concussion, I think it was. He left the game with a concussion. So I'm sure most people who had him in playoffs pretty much were struggling the entire weekend, just pretty much freaking out because their best player was gone. But anyone else that really comes to mind for this? No, everyone else pretty much like Ted Ginn. That's a loser right there. 2 receptions, 10 yards. If you're in the playoffs and you get Ted Ginn on your team, don't play Ted Ginn. Go with the players that you know are going to help you out. This isn't the time to overthink it, really. But as for the Falcons, Matt Ryan, loser, 221 221 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. Devontae Freeman, winner, 24 carries, 91 yards, 1 touchdown. Tevin Coleman, loser, 9 carries, 32 yards. Julio Jones, not a winner. I'm going to consider Julio a loser. I mean, with how his talent level, he should be doing way better than what he is right now. Only 5 receptions for 98 yards. That's not good enough. You need a touchdown there at least. Mohamed Sanu, that's a winner right there. 6 receptions, 83 yards and a touchdown. And Austin Hooper is a loser. 2 receptions for 23 yards. Let's head over to the Vikings and Panthers game. Let's see right here. We have, with the Vikings, Case Keenum, I'm going to consider a loser. 280 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, though. Any Minnesota running back that you might have started, that's loser right there. Let's see, did they score any touchdowns receiving the ball? They did not. So Jerick McKinnon, 7 carries, 46 yards. And Latavius Murray, 9 carries for 14 yards. Like I said, losers right there. Adam Thielen, 6 receptions, 105 yards, 1 touchdown. That's winner. Loser, Stephon Diggs, 6 receptions, 64 yards. And winner, Kyle Rudolph, 3 receptions for 41 yards and a touchdown. As for Carolina, you have Cam Newton. I'm going to go loser on Cam Newton. Only 137 yards through the air, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Did have 70 yards rushing, but I don't think that's good enough right there. Jonathan Stewart, big winner, 16 carries, 103 yards, 3 touchdowns. Devin Funchess, he's not really a winner or loser. Did have a touchdown, but only 59 yards. Christian McCaffrey, loser, only 3 receptions for 18 yards and 8 carries for 35 yards, no touchdowns. Next game up, we got the Colts heading into the Bills. There was no winners in this one besides. If you had LaShawn McCoy or Frank Gore, that's all I'm going to do. LaShawn McCoy or Frank Gore, winner. Anyone else, you struggled. Let's see. Bears at Bengals. This is going to be a fun one right here. Pretty much anyone on the Bengals, a loser, unless you started Brandon LaFell. That's the only winner. LaFell had 3. That's not even a winner right there. He only had 24 yards. Excuse me right there. Giovanni Bernard might be a winner, I guess. He did have over 100 yards total and then 6 receptions. So if you got him in PPR league, that helped out. AJ Green, obviously loser, 5 receptions, 64 yards, and Andy Dalton, 141 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. That's loser right there. Mitch Trubisky, neither winner nor a loser. I mean, he did have 271 yards and a touchdown, but those aren't really great fantasy numbers. Jordan Howard, big winner, 147 yards, 2 touchdowns. Let's see, anyone else? Kendall Wright, winner, 10 receptions, 107 yards. No touchdowns, but those are pretty big numbers right there. Next game up, we got the Green Bay Packers heading into Cleveland. Let's go right here. Let's see. We got Brett Hundley, winner right there. 265 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Also took off with the ball 7 times, got 31 yards from that. So that's a solid, nice little 3 points right there added. Jamal Williams, winner, 15 carries, 49 yards, 1 touchdown. Also had 7 receptions for 69 yards and a touchdown. Let's see. Devontae Adams, 10 receptions, 84 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's a winner right there. Jordy Nelson, another loser, 4 receptions, 33 yards. Guy's been pretty bad since Aaron Rodgers went down, but we'll talk about him. Pretty much all the other Packers players that are going to be affected from Rodgers coming back later on. You got Deshaun Kaiser. Was going to be a winner, but ended up throwing 2 picks. I mean, he did have 214 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, like I said. Isaiah Crowell, that's a winner right there, 121 yards rushing. Josh Gordon, winner, 3 receptions, 69 yards and a touchdown. Corey Coleman, winner, 5 receptions, 62 yards and a touchdown. And Duke Johnson, if you have him in a PPR league, 4 receptions, 41 yards and a touchdown. So a good game from him. Next game up, we got the 49ers heading into Houston. And I'm going to consider Jimmy Garoppolo a winner. If you were streaming him and just needed someone to fill in, that worked out pretty well, I feel. He threw for 334 yards, 1 touchdown, did have a pick, but 334 yards of a touchdown is pretty good. Carlos Hyde, winner, 78 yards rushing, 1 touchdown. Marquise Goodwin, winner, 6 receptions, 106 yards. And if you started Garrett Selleck at the tight end position, that's a winner right there. 2 receptions, 67 yards, and a touchdown. Let's see. Let's head over to the Texans side. Not too many winners or losers. I mean, if somehow you have mind control or something like that, or you can see into the future, you started TJ Yates, I guess that's all right. He had 175 yards, 2 touchdowns. Tom Savage got hurt in that game, left it. Let's see. Lamar Miller, that's a loser right there. 17 carries, 53 yards. Didn't do much in that game. DeAndre Hopkins, winner, 11 receptions, 149 yards, 2 touchdowns. Will Fuller, loser, 3 receptions, 26 yards. If you still have Will Fuller on your team, you might as well just drop him. That guy's just taking up space on your team. Let's head over to this Raiders and Chiefs game. Raiders really disappointed in this one. I mean, even not talking about fantasy, I mean, these guys should have been a whole lot better than what they've been this season. And then for them to come up in a big game against Kansas City and pretty much lay down for Kansas City to do what they wanted. I mean, Oakland was just really, they just pretty much, like I said, they just laid down, let Kansas City run all over them, let Alex Smith do whatever he wanted. I mean, Alex Smith actually not really a guy. Didn't even throw for any touchdowns, I don't think. But it's just Oakland really, instead of standing up to them, they pretty much, like I said, just went up into the armadillo position. And I don't know. I don't get the Raiders right now. This should be a whole lot better. But loser, Derek Carr, 211 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. Marshawn Lynch, winner, 61 yards, rushing, 1 touchdown. Jared Cook, winner, 5 receptions for 75 yards and a touchdown. Loser, Michael Crabtree, 7 receptions, 60 yards. And pretty much no one else really did anything notable for the Oakland team. So a lot of losers right there. Alex Smith, loser, comes off of a 399-yard 4 TD performance. Replicates that with the 268-yard, no touchdown, 1 pick performance. So a loser right there. Kareem Hunt finally played well. Winner, 116 yards, rushing, 1 touchdown. Tyreek Hill, loser, 4 receptions, 75 yards, and Travis Kelce, loser, 7 receptions for 74 yards. Not big games from either of them. As for Detroit, they headed into Tampa Bay. Matt Stafford, loser, 381 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. Theo Riddick, winner, 29 yards, rushing, also had 2 touchdowns though. Eric Ebron, winner, 10 receptions, 94 yards. Golden Tate, winner, 8 receptions, 85 yards and a touchdown. And Marvin Jones Jr., loser, 3 receptions for 64 yards. Also adding to Theo Riddick, he had 6 receptions and 64 yards also, so a big game from him. As for Tampa Bay, Jameis Winston, not really a winner nor a loser. I mean, he did have 2 touchdowns, 285 yards, but did throw for 2 picks. Peyton Barber, I mean, really no one on this Tampa Bay rushing, any of these Tampa Bay running backs were winners right here. Doug Martin did have a touchdown, but only 26 yards. Mike Evans, loser, 2 receptions, 25 yards. O.J. Howard, winner, 4 receptions, 54 yards. And Deshaun Jackson, loser, 4 receptions for 41 yards. As for the Dallas Cowboys, headed into New York, faced off with the Giants. Dak Prescott, big winner right here, 332 yards, 3 touchdowns. Alfred Morris, loser, only 19 carries for 62 yards. Rod Smith, 6 carries, 47 yards, 1 touchdown, and 5 receptions for 113 yards and a touchdown. Obvious winner right there. Dez Bryant, 3 receptions for 73 yards and a touchdown. And Jason Wynn, since he's a tight end, I'll consider him a winner. Had 1 catch, 20 yards, and a touchdown right there. So that's about 8 points right there. As for the Giants, I mean, really no winners. Actually, no winners on that team. I'm not even going to go into it. So, yeah, no winners for them. Let's see. Tennessee versus Arizona. This might be another game with no winners. Marcus Mariota, obvious loser right here. 159 yards, no touchdowns, 2 picks. DeMarco Murray, loser, 11 carries, 34 yards. Yeah, obviously a loser right there. Derrick Henry, I guess you could consider it not really a winner or loser. Did have 20 yards and a touchdown. So, I mean, it's 10 points right there. Or it's only 8 points, actually. Yeah, so loser right there. Derrick Henry, only 8 points. Eric Decker, loser, 3 receptions, 56 yards. Delaney Walker, loser, 5 receptions, 42 yards. Rashard Matthews, loser, 3 receptions, 39 yards. Let's head over to Arizona. Blaine Gabbert didn't play, or did all right, I guess. Game manager Blaine Gabbert, but for fantasy didn't do well. 178 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. Loser right there. Kerwin Williams, loser, only 73 yards rushing, no touchdowns. Larry Fitzgerald, loser, 5 receptions for 44 yards. Pretty much anyone else is a loser on this team for fantasy and for Tennessee. So if you started anyone from either of these teams, you probably lost this week. Let's see. New York heading into Denver. No winners in the Jets. On the Jets side, they're all losers right there. Trevor Siemian, neither a winner nor a loser. I mean, you should be starting him in fantasy either way. C.J. Anderson, loser right there. Only 2 receptions for 25 yards and only 48 yards rushing. Devontae Booker, loser, 22 yards. Demaryius Thomas, winner, 8 receptions, 93 yards and a touchdown. And Emmanuel Sanders, loser, only 1 reception for 16 yards. Let's see, next game up, we got the Chargers and Redskins. Let's see. Kirk Cousins, loser, only 151 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Perine, loser, only 17 carries for 45 yards. Josh Dotson, loser, 3 receptions, 34 yards. Jamison Crowder, loser, 3 receptions, 34 yards also. And I guess for Vernon Davis, if you started him, you lucked out. The guy had 8 points right there, 26 yards and a touchdown. Also had 2 receptions. As for the Chargers, winner Phillip Rivers, 319 yards, 2 touchdowns. Melvin Gordon, winner, 78 yards, 1 touchdown. Tyrell Williams, 4 receptions, 132 yards, 1 touchdown. Keenan Allen, winner, 6 receptions, 111 yards, no touchdowns. Hunter Henry, also a winner, 4 receptions, 50 yards, and a touchdown. Chargers have been looking good. I think they're going to win their division this year. Let's see, Seattle versus Jacksonville. I can't consider Russell Wilson a loser. Did have 271 yards, 3 touchdowns, but also did have 3 picks. Mike Davis, loser. Pretty much any running back that you had on the Seattle Seahawks, that's a loser right there. Tyler Lockett, winner, 4 receptions, 90 yards and a touchdown. Doug Baldwin, winner, 3 receptions, 78 yards and a touchdown. And Paul Richardson, winner, 3 receptions, 72 yards and a touchdown. Jimmy Graham, loser, no catches, no yards. Blake Bortles, winner, 268 yards, 2 touchdowns. Leonard Fournette, winner, 101 yards rushing, 1 touchdown. D.D. Westbrook, winner, 5 receptions, 81 yards and a touchdown. And Marquise Lee, loser, 5 receptions for 65 yards. Let's head into this Eagles and Rams game. If you had Carson Wentz as your quarterback, good luck to you the rest of the way, because that guy obviously blew out his knee, but he did have 291 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick, so that's a winner right there. Did a little something before he left the season. Jerry Jai, loser, 15 carries, 78 yards. Torrey Smith, winner, 6 receptions, 100 yards. Trey Burton, 5 receptions, 71 yards, 2 touchdowns. Nelson Aguilar, loser, 8 receptions for 64 yards. Alshon Jeffrey, winner, 5 receptions, 52 yards, and a touchdown. Heading over to L.A., Jared Goff, not really winner nor loser, only had 199 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Todd Gurley, winner, 96 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns, also had 39 yards receiving. Cooper Kupp, winner, 5 receptions, 118 yards and a touchdown. And Sammy Watkins, he did have a touchdown, but only 21 yards, so neither a winner nor a loser right there. As for the Ravens and Steelers, we're going to have a lot of winners in this one, I feel. Joe Flacco, winner, 269 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. Alex Collins, 120 yards, 1 touchdown. Buck Allen, 25 yards rushing, but did have 2 touchdowns. Winner right there. Mike Wallace, loser, only 3 receptions for 72 yards. Chris Moore, I'm not really going to talk about him, because if you got him on your fantasy team, then you're probably not even in the playoffs, actually. Let's see, anyone else? Nope. Jeremy Maclin, loser, 3 receptions for 27 yards. Let's head over to Pittsburgh. Winner, Ben Roethlisberger, 506 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. Le'Veon Bell, winner, 48 yards, 2 touchdowns. Also had 9 receptions for 77 yards and a touchdown. Antonio Brown, big winner, 213 yards, 11 receptions. Jesse James, winner, 10 receptions, 97 yards, no touchdowns. Martavius Bryant had 6 receptions, but only 33 yards, so loser right there. As for our final game for winners and losers, you had the Patriots versus the Miami Dolphins. Let's see, Tom Brady, loser, 233 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Deion Lewis, loser, only 5 carries for 17 yards. Did have 5 receptions for 50 yards, though, but not a good game yardage-wise or scoring-wise. Rex Burkhead, let's see, did have 53 total yards and a touchdown, so I'll consider that a winner right there. Danny Amendola, loser, 6 receptions, 76 yards, no touchdowns. Brandon Cooks, big loser right here. Only 1 catch for 38 yards, no touchdowns. Dwayne Allen, loser also, 2 receptions for 10 yards. Let's go ahead over to Miami. Jay Cutler, winner, 263 yards, 3 touchdowns. Guy played like he hasn't played all season. I mean, just a really good game from him. Kenyon Drake, 25 carries, 114 yards, 5 receptions, 79 yards. Obvious winner right there. Jarvis Landry, winner, 8 receptions, 46 yards, 2 touchdowns. Devontae Parker, loser, only 4 receptions for 40 yards. And Kenny Stills, loser, only 2 receptions for 18 yards. And that's actually going to wrap it up for winners and losers. Next up, we're going to talk about the Denver Broncos and Indianapolis Colts games. Talk a little bit about fantasy for that one, and pretty much talk about anything else about the game that we need to. So, stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. If you missed that last segment or need a quick reminder, we did the winners and losers from last week for Week 14. Talked about each game, gave the stats for each player who did well in fantasy, and talked about the players who didn't do well for fantasy. And for this segment, we're going to talk about the Thursday night football game between the Denver Broncos and Indianapolis Colts. Let me check who's the home team in this one. I think it's almost positive it's the Colts. So it's the Colts. Denver's favored by 3 in this one, but not really the most enticing game for fantasy football players, because last week, for the Colts, you really didn't have anyone do anything. Let me see if I can pull up their stats real quick. I think Frank Gore, he had like 130 yards, didn't have a touchdown though. And then, because last week was when they were playing that big old snow game against Buffalo. We pretty much couldn't do anything. If you started Jacoby Brissett because you needed a streaming option, it didn't work out well for you at all. He only had 69 yards and a touchdown. Took off with the ball 3 times and only had 10 yards rushing. Like I said, Frank Gore had 130 yards. Also had a reception for 10 yards, so that's about 14 points right there. So if we started him, that was good. Marlon Mack didn't do much in the game either. Only had 44 total yards. T.Y. Hilton couldn't do anything because obviously the snow was just way too difficult. Made it too difficult for Jacoby Brissett to pass. Hilton only had 2 receptions for 20 yards. Jack Doyle, I guess that's cool from him. 2 receptions, 4 yards, and a touchdown. I started him last week, and that touchdown, I didn't really need it, but it was good to see that he got a touchdown in that snow game, so really helped me out too. But let's head over to talk a little about Denver too. Last week they didn't really do anything for fantasy either. Demarius Thomas did have 8 receptions for 98 yards and a touchdown, I think it was, but Emmanuel Sanders only had 1 reception for 16 yards, and then who else was there? C.J. Anderson only had maybe 70 total yards, I think it was. Didn't really do too much there. Devontae Booker, if you were looking to look for a streaming option for your running back, he didn't do much. Trevor Siemian only 200 yards and a touchdown, but if you're streaming for a quarterback and you're starting Trevor Siemian, then you're a brave man or woman. Either way, it doesn't matter. You're almost kind of crazy if you're going to throw a Denver Broncos quarterback to start for your fantasy team. But if you got anyone going on in this game, this is one of the few games to where there's really no one, I guess, that you could say that you'd want to start or is going to have a good game, because Denver and Indianapolis right now, they're more looking forward to the offseason, seeing to what they can do to fix their teams. Jacoby Brissett, I'm not really sure what type of game he's going to have, because this Denver defense pretty much shows up whenever it wants. It's honestly kind of odd to see how this all has played out for both teams. The Colts, without Andrew Luck, no one really expected them to do much, and I guess you could say they've a little bit overachieved a little with Jacoby Brissett playing quarterback. I think they have 3 wins. So I don't even know if I can say overachieved, because that's still pretty bad. But, no one really expected them to do much. And as far as the Broncos, that team will only go as far as a quarterback takes them. When you got Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch, and Brock Osweiler as your 3 quarterbacks on the roster, you really have no chance at winning any games. Right now the Broncos, I think they're 4-9, I think it is. Yeah, 4-9 they should be. And just like I said, for this game, it's not really a fun, enticing fantasy football looking type of game or anything like that. If you got T.Y. Hilton, I'm not even sure if you could start him tonight, because like I said, it's going to be at home. But that Denver secondary always usually plays well. So, if you want to start T.Y. Hilton because he's your top receiver, you really don't have anyone better, then go right ahead. But, it's not really looking good for him. Same with Jacoby Brissett. I wouldn't start him against the Broncos defense. I just don't think he's going to be able to do much. There's really, Denver's defense obviously isn't what it was the past couple of seasons. But I've been saying, and I'm going to continue to say, that more has to do with the offense not being on the field long enough. Because, like I said, when you got Trevor Siemian out there playing quarterback, you're not going to put up many points, okay? And you're not going to go for many long drives. So, you're probably going to have plenty of 3-and-outs, plenty of punts, plenty of short drives. So, when the defense is out there for 20, 25 minutes of the game, usually, play about 60 minutes, even 30, 35 minutes of the game, then you're really going to have no chance, because, like I said, your defense is going to get tired. But, as for this game, it's going to be one of those low-scoring, boring Thursday night football games, all right? I'm going for a 10-7 type of score, maybe 17-10, but, I'm not really too sure who. I'm trying to figure out who I could say to start. Demarius Thomas, like I said last week, he had 8 receptions for 96 yards and a touchdown. So if you were going to start one player from either of these teams, I say Demarius Thomas is the only player. You could think about starting Denver's defense, or actually, let me talk about Demarius Thomas for a little bit. Let me see if I could pull up his fantasy stats, see how he's done. Obviously, they're not going to be great because of how poorly the quarterback play has been, but I think they're better than Emmanuel Sanders is by far, and maybe a little bit better than what's his name? T.Y. Hilton. But yeah, let me see if I can pull it up. But yeah, just continue to talk about it. I mean, in this game, there's really no one in here to where you're like, oh yeah, I could start him and I'll be fine. Because I mean, you start T.Y. Hilton, how do you know he's not going to get locked up by that secondary? Okay, you start Frank Gore, how do you know that Denver's rush defense isn't going to show up tonight like they have? Like they did last week against the Jets. I mean, I know the Jets have one of the worst rushing offenses, but either way, I mean, you still got to show up and play well. But let me see if I could find Demaryius Thomas real quick. Oh, here he is. All right, so yeah, he's ranked number 22 in ESPN Fantasy. Last week he had 19 points. The week before that, only 3 against Oakland, only 4 against Cincinnati, only 14.9 against New England, had 12.9 against Philly. He had 17 against Kansas City, 9 against the Chargers the week before that, 1.9 against the Giants, 16.3 against Oakland again, 1.6 against Buffalo, 12.8 against Dallas, 10.1, and against the Chargers, 9.2. So other than, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, other than 4 games, I mean, he's pretty much been around that whole 10 point mark. That's pretty much, like, for me, 10 points right there is pretty much what you want at least out of your players, because if they're not giving you 10, then you really have no shot at least at winning your game. Because let's see, let me go over my team from last week. Let's see, I actually did pretty well last week. I had Case Keenum, who gave me, actually I'm gonna have to go back a week to do this. Sorry, hold up. But yeah, like I said, I mean, you want at least 10 points a week from your fantasy players. But yeah, Case Keenum, he gave me 28. Jordan Howard gave me 30. Kenyon Drake gave me 24. Michael Thomas gave me 22. Antonio Brown gave me 25. Jack Doyle, he gave me 7.4. Glad I started him instead of Greg Olsen. Let's see, Josh Gordon gave me 14. The Vikings defense only gave me 1. Will Lutz gave me 5 points, the kicker. I left Devontae Adams on the bench. He would have gave me 25.4. Doug Martin, I left him on the bench too, would have gave me 11. Dion Lewis, last minute I put Kenyon Drake in for Dion Lewis. Dion Lewis would have gave me 9.7, and the Rams defense would have only gave me 3. So I mean, you see right there, I mean all those players gave me at least double-digit points. Most of them were above the 20s, but, I mean, you really just got to hope that you got a guy like Demaryius Thomas who's going to be consistent for you, because if not, then you're going to struggle. But, yeah, going back, I mean, in this game, you really don't want to start Trevor Siemian, because Indianapolis' defense, like, if you need a streaming quarterback and there's absolutely no one better than Trevor Siemian, then Trevor Siemian might be the right call. Indianapolis' defense really doesn't play too good of football, and there's really nothing, like, pretty much there's not one thing that they do great. So, I mean, if you needed a quarterback, then yeah, Trevor Siemian, I guess, could be the guy. But, I mean, that's a big risk you're taking, especially if you're still trying to make moves now. Obviously, you're playing in playoffs unless you're one of those guys who play in the little consolation loser brackets who still try to set up your lineup. But, I mean, if you're one of those guys or girls or one of the guys or girls who are playing in the playoffs, I mean, going with Trevor Siemian, obviously, I mean, that'd be like if Carson Wentz was your quarterback and you pretty much have no other option. So, yes, Trevor Siemian is the only way I could see you starting him this week in playoffs, because I mean, chances are you're playing in your semifinals right now, or at least the final. But yeah, just like I said, Trevor Siemian, really not thinking he's going to play well. I mean, C.J. Anderson, he could be a guy who plays all right tonight. Like I said, Indianapolis really doesn't have like a strong rush defense or a strong secondary or anything like that. So, I mean, you're really playing eeny, meeny, miny, mo, or pretty much Russian roulette when you're deciding on whether or not you're going to throw C.J. Anderson out there or even any of these Denver players. Because like I said, C.J. Anderson on any given night can go and break out for at least 10 points in your fantasy league. But, I mean, the guy can always break out for 5 points also, and pretty much that's all he's going to give you. As far as Devontae Booker goes, I'm staying away from him as a streaming option. Really don't think like, he's starting to get less and less carries too. They're starting to give the ball to C.J. Anderson a whole lot more. And I feel like if you're going to start a Broncos running back, then it's got to be C.J. Anderson, but proceed with caution on that one. Like I said, Demaryius Thomas, if you're going to start one player that's going to actually make sense, it's going to be him. I think he could go for a good game right here, because I'm sure if Denver's going to score a touchdown, the only way they're going to score touchdowns is if they're throwing the ball to Demaryius Thomas. Emmanuel Sanders has pretty much been a ghost all season. Really hasn't been around too much, hasn't done well in fantasy at all. He had that good couple of years with Peyton Manning, but ever since then, he's pretty much been trending down. And like I said, as for the Colts, I mean, I'm staying away from Jacoby Brissett. Really don't think he's going to be able to do too well against this Denver defense. And Frank Gore, I mean, if you need a running back or someone's hurt or something like that, then I guess you go with Frank Gore. But if you got better options, obviously you go with them. Doesn't matter who they are. T.Y. Hilton, I'm going to sit him this week. Not me like specifically, but if I had him, I'd sit him. Don't think he's going to play too well. And the only player I really like from the Colts is Jack Doyle, and I got him on my team. But he's been a pretty reliable tight end so far this season, and Jacoby Brissett always looks for him. So, I mean, if you got Jack Doyle, go start him. I would. I think he's top 10 right now in ESPN Fantasy. I think he's like number 8 or number 7, I think. Can't remember exactly. But, yeah, I mean, in both of these defense, I mean, I wouldn't touch Indianapolis' fantasy defense with a 10-foot pole or whatever. And then as far as Denver's goes, I mean, this might be one of the few weeks where you could start them and come out and have a good game from them. But, I mean, it's all risks right here. If you're out here starting any of these guys, then, I mean, you're taking a big chance in playoffs. So I'd pretty much stay away from them and pretty much look for any other better options, whether it's on the waiver wire or on your bench. So that's actually going to wrap it up for this segment. Next up, we're going to be talking about Aaron Rodgers, what to do with him, talk about Alvin Kamara, talk about players who I'm not really looking forward to starting this week, and players, pretty much players I don't think that have good matchups this week. So we'll do that. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
To the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. And last segment we talked about the Denver Broncos and Indianapolis Colts game that's going to be going on tonight for Thursday Night Football. And I just wish Thursday night, like the people whoever come up with the games for Thursday Night Football or like decide which game is going to be on Thursday night, like can we stop getting these terrible games? Can you start giving us something good to watch at least? I mean, like, come on now. It's like, I mean, I understand, like, because Thursday Night Football, it's a total money grab by the NFL. At least that's what they've attempted to do. I know that's probably what's been hurting the ratings, Thursday Night Football, because they'll always point to like the protest or like the hits or anything like that. But what's really hurting their ratings is Thursday Night Football. No one wants to watch that. No one likes Thursday Night Football. Thursday Night Football is a bad product. Week in and week out, these players talk about how they hate playing on Thursdays because it's not enough time. So, I mean, why doesn't Goodell and all those suits up there in the front office, why don't they ever listen? I mean, I don't understand. I mean, if you're going to, if you're going to have Thursday Night Football as it is, give us good games at least. Like, no one wants to watch the 4-9 Denver Broncos versus the 3-10 Indianapolis Colts, because you can't tell me in the beginning of the season, oh, everyone thought Denver would be good. No, Trevor Siemian's a terrible quarterback. Paxton Lynch, terrible quarterback. Brock Osweiler, one of the worst quarterbacks I've ever seen. All right, and as far as the Colts, I mean, that team is nothing with Andrew Luck, and we all knew how his shoulder was in the offseason, and we weren't even sure if he was going to come back and play this season. I mean, he did try and come out and practice, but I mean, after that, he pretty much shut it down and said, I'm not good. So, I mean, what were they thinking putting the Colts and Denver Broncos on Thursday Night Football? It just doesn't make sense to me. I don't get it. But going back to like talking about fantasy-wise, like just to recap, I was talking about how if you're going to start a player in this league, 'cause I know it is playoffs for most people, so if you're going to start a player, it's going to be Demaryius Thomas. But other than that, I'm pretty much staying away from anyone else in this game. I don't trust C.J. Anderson. I don't trust Frank Gore. I definitely don't trust Trevor Siemian. Don't trust Jacoby Brissett in this one. Jacoby Brissett, he's more been a decent fantasy football quarterback, like for streaming options and stuff like that. But I mean, in this game right here, I really don't trust him at all. Like I said, Emmanuel Sanders, stay away from him. T.Y. Hilton, I wouldn't be starting him. Like Demaryius Thomas and Jack Doyle, the only two players right there. Jack Doyle plays tight end for the Colts, for those that don't know or just can't recognize. But yeah, I mean, those two players right there, I mean, if either team is going to score a touchdown, it's going to be through those two players. So I feel like those would be good options. Like even with Denver's defense against this Colts offense, Denver's defense isn't what it was once was a few years ago and all that, even last year. So I mean, I'd pretty much shy away from Denver's defense. Indianapolis's defense, I would never think to pick them up ever in the history of fantasy football. So yeah, you just pretty much got to watch out for it. But I think it's going to be a low scoring game. So I mean, do not start T.Y. Hilton or anyone, I feel. But we'll see how it all goes. But guess who's back? Aaron Rodgers is finally back. It's been, he went out like week 4, week 5, something like that. Now he's back in week 15, back practicing. He was officially activated off of IR, I think it was, or whatever he was on. So, I mean, now you're pretty much wondering, it's playoff time, semifinals, final time, or you're just starting your playoffs. So you're pretty much wondering, like I said, what do I do with Aaron Rodgers? And I think what you do, like, we're going to talk about a few players, all right? We're going to talk about Jordy Nelson. We'll talk about Devontae Adams. We'll talk about Aaron Rodgers, Jamal Williams, pretty much what it means for those guys, all right? So, look, Aaron Rodgers is back. If you have him on your team, and unless you have a guy like Russell Wilson or let me see who the top fantasy quarterbacks are this season. Let me pull that up as I'm talking. But, I mean, yeah, for me, like Aaron Rodgers, like on my team, I have Case Keenum, so obviously I would go with Rodgers, even though Keenum's been playing well. Actually, I got to check. Who is Keenum playing this week? Keenum is playing the Cincinnati Bengals. So, I mean, I don't know if I'd start Aaron Rodgers over Case Keenum. It'd be a tough one right there. But, like, say, yeah, like, then you go over the top players in fantasy right now. So, say you got Carson Wentz. No, there's no way you could have Aaron Rodgers and Carson Wentz. So, I guess, I don't know. Say you got, like, Russell Wilson on your team, and you got, like, a guy like Tom Brady maybe, or even Dak Prescott or Drew Brees, or even Phillip Rivers. I'd start those guys. But, I mean, if you really have, like, if you've been streaming quarterbacks since Rodgers went out and you really haven't had that one guy who's played well, then I'm starting Rodgers all the way. I mean, even if you have those guys, I mean, it all depends on matchups. Like, Phillip Rivers is playing Kansas City. Kansas City really doesn't have too good of a secondary. I think Russell Wilson is playing the Rams. So, like, yeah, I guess if I had Rodgers and Wilson, I'd start Rodgers all the way because the Rams right now have a good secondary. And Carolina's defense has played well, but I just don't think that secondary is as good as everyone thinks. And it's more their linebackers who do a good job on that defense. But, yeah, as far as Aaron Rodgers goes, I mean, yeah, if you got him, start him, I feel. I mean, Devontae Adams, he's been playing well since Rodgers went down. So if you got Adams, too, I'm starting Adams this week. Yeah, they're playing Carolina. I'm starting Adams instead of Josh Gordon. I'm also starting Michael Thomas and Antonio Brown. If you're wondering, how did you get all of those guys? It's pretty much I got Adams through the draft, picked up Gordon off of waivers, traded for Michael Thomas, and then I got Michael Crabtree along with Michael Thomas, and I got Jarvis Landry on another trade, giving away A.J. Green. And I ended up using Crabtree and Landry to get Antonio Brown. Whereas it wasn't a popular trade in my league, but it is what it is. I'm like Danny Ainge when it comes to trade. I pretty much come out on top, and the other team pretty much doesn't do well after that. But yeah, just like I said, going back to the Packers and Aaron Rodgers, I mean, the effect it's going to have on a guy like Devontae Adams, I mean, like I said, he's been playing well these last few games. Let me pull up his stats. Right now, ESPN has him ranked as the number 8 receiver in all of fantasy. So let's go since week 6 against Minnesota, all right? So that week, I mean, he had 13.9 before Aaron Rodgers went out. Then New Orleans comes Brett Hundley's first game. Adams only had 2 receptions for 12 yards. Against Detroit, he had 7 receptions for 53 yards. Then against Chicago, he had 5 receptions for 90 yards and a touchdown. Against Baltimore, that's 8 receptions for 126 yards. Against Pittsburgh, that's 5 receptions for 82 yards and a touchdown. Tampa Bay was a bad game, only 4 receptions for 42 yards. And then against Cleveland, he had 10 receptions for 84 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, I mean, even with Rodgers out, Devontae Adams has been playing well, and he's pretty much solidified his spot as the number 1 receiver. I know that Jordy Nelson, he used to be the number 1 guy, and before that it was Randall Cobb, but Devontae Adams has pretty much shown that that's the guy. Brett Hundley over these past 7-6 weeks, however long it was. 7 weeks I think it was. 8 weeks, doesn't really matter. But either way, yeah, Devontae Adams has shown with Brett Hundley playing quarterback that's the most reliable guy on that offense to throw the ball to, because, I mean, that's pretty much all you saw. Jordy Nelson really hasn't done much this entire season for fantasy. Let me see if I can pull up his stats. The guy's been so disappointing this season. And I think with Rodgers coming back, I mean, it might be all right to start Jordy Nelson, but, I mean, that's pretty much, like I say, it's playing Russian roulette when you're in the playoffs. You really don't need to be doing all that. Like, if I have Jordy Nelson on my team, I'm still not starting him. I'm going to wait a week because, like I said, I mean, it's playoffs. You pretty much got to put your best players out there, and you can't really take too many chances. You need to go out and do what you know is going to work, because if not, then you're going to end up losing, and you're going to be out of playoffs. But, so yeah, like week 1 against Seattle, he had 17.4, didn't play against Atlanta, or didn't have any catches at least. Against Cincinnati, he had 20.2 points. Against Chicago, week 4, 21.5 points. Against Dallas, 9.4. And then Minnesota, the game where Aaron Rodgers gets hurt, he had 9. Then against New Orleans, he had 1.8. Against Detroit, 5.5. Against Chicago, 3.5. Against Baltimore, 3.4. Against Pittsburgh, 2.6. Against Tampa Bay, 4.2. And against Cleveland, 5.3. So obviously, ever since Rodgers went down, his numbers went completely down also. So I mean, it's pretty tough to decide whether or not you think Jordy Nelson is going to be someone who you should start. If it's me, I'm not starting him. I don't trust Jordy right now at all. Yeah, like I said, he hasn't had any double-digit fantasy games, but I mean, with Rodgers back out there, I mean, anything could happen. I know Rodgers is going to look at other receivers a whole lot more than Brett Hundley did, because Brett Hundley, as a quarterback, he's pretty limited. So, I mean, you really can't trust what he's going to do. He's always going to look for his little security blanket, which was Devontae Adams. But we all know that Aaron Rodgers is miles ahead of Brett Hundley as a quarterback. So, obviously, Rodgers is going to play a whole lot better, and he's going to be able to spread the field out more and be able to get it to more of his receivers. So, I mean, Jordy Nelson could be you could play Jordy this week, but if it's me, I'm staying away from him from one more week, because obviously, if you're in the playoffs right now and you have Jordy on your team, you obviously have probably 3 other better receivers that you've been playing all season, or probably 3 running backs that you've been playing. Either one of the receivers or running backs is in the flex position. But yeah, just either way, I mean, if it's me, I'm not starting Jordy. Don't really trust him this week. I get that Rodgers is back, and I trust Rodgers more than I trust Jordy Nelson. So I mean, I guess that kind of does not make sense, but I just don't think Jordy Nelson is going to come out and break out in this game. Really, I don't think he's going to put up too many fantasy points, especially against Carolina. And as for Jamal Williams, I mean, what's going to happen with his production? He's been playing well, and I think his production is going to stay the same, and maybe even get a little bit better, because now teams are going to have to game plan for Rodgers, whereas they were probably looking for Williams a whole lot more, because he was probably one of the better players on that offense ever since Rodgers went out. It was always him and Devontae Adams. So, I mean, if you got Jamal Williams, I still think that's a must-start right there. Not even must-start, but I think if you got him and he's one of your better options, then go ahead and start him, because I feel that he's going to play well still. The only thing actually I kind of worry about is with Carolina's linebackers. You got Thomas Davis, Luke Kuechly, who've been playing out of their minds the last couple of games. Plus, Carolina really needs this game to pretty much closing the gap on the New Orleans Saints. Let me see if what their records are right now. Let me pull that up. But yeah, right now this is a game that Carolina needs, and this is obviously a game that Green Bay needs, because if Green Bay loses this game too, they're really not going to have any shot at making playoffs with 7 losses. So it's pretty much do or die for them right now. But let's see, Carolina's currently 9-4 along with the Saints, and the Saints are playing the Jets. So I mean, the Saints are going to win that one, but either way, Carolina's going to need a win to keep up. So obviously, you know that defense is going to be on their best effort, playing well, and you know Thomas Davis and Luke Kuechly, like I said, they're going to show up and play well too. So I mean, Jamal Williams, I mean, I'd still, I guess, I don't know, would I start Jamal Williams? It's kind of difficult to say, because like I said, I mean, you really don't know whether or not how he's going to do against these Carolina linebackers. So, I mean, if I had to pick one, I'd say go ahead and sit him. Ooh, that's a tough one. Yeah, I'd say sit him, but we'll see how it all ends up. But to finish off this segment, we got a couple minutes left. Let's go over players whose matchups I don't like this week. All right, let me load it up real quick. Here we go. Sorry, it's taking a moment, but one player off the top of my head. I got it pulled up right here, so we'll just go through it. We'll go through quarterbacks, running backs. We're not going to do every quarterback or anything like that, but obviously we're just going to pick a matchup that I don't like. So let's get into it right now. For quarterbacks, let's see, who's going to be the first one that I don't like? I just seen one of the guys in my league has Nick Foles starting. I wouldn't start Nick Foles this week, all right? If you're that brave and you think he's going to play well, good on you, but really don't think Nick Foles is going to be that guy. I mean, we'll pretty much talk about him more in the starting and sitting portion of the next segment. But yeah, I really like Nick Foles. Let's see. Any other quarterbacks? Matchups that we don't like? I don't like. All these quarterbacks really got good matchups this week so far. I really don't like Derek Carr. I mean, it doesn't really matter that he's playing Dallas. It's just Derek Carr to me just really hasn't seemed to play well ever since he came off his back injury. So I don't really like Derek Carr going this week. I don't like Jameis Winston going against Atlanta. I think he's at least going to throw a couple of picks, have a couple of turnovers at least. So yeah, I don't like Jameis Winston against Atlanta. Aaron Rodgers, I like him against Carolina, obviously. Russell Wilson against the Rams, I don't really trust that one too much. He did throw 3 interceptions against the Jaguars defense last week. Let's see, Kirk Cousins against Arizona. Don't like that one either. Last week, Kirk Cousins didn't play well against the Chargers defense, and Arizona does have a solid defense. So I mean, Kirk Cousins against them, I really don't trust it too much. That's not a good matchup to me for him. And let's see if we can find one more quarterback. Alex Smith against the Chargers. Don't think that's going to be a good matchup for him. Don't like it. Last week he didn't play well. And who did he play last week? The Raiders. And the Raiders got one of the worst defenses in the league, and the Chargers have one of the better ones in the league. So yeah, I really don't like Really don't like Alex Smith against the Chargers. Andy Dalton is another matchup I don't like. He's playing the Minnesota Vikings. And last week, the Minnesota Vikings, what did they play? I keep forgetting. Oh, yeah, they played the Panthers. Yeah, so the defense didn't do well against the Panthers. But against this Cincinnati offense, I think that they're going to cause havoc for Andy Dalton. Plus, I know that Minnesota Vikings, the defensive line hasn't been playing well, but the Cincinnati has one of the worst offensive lines in the league. So let's go. We'll do a couple of running backs for what I don't like. Let's see. I don't like starting Rex Burkhead or Deion Lewis against Pittsburgh. I don't think they're going to do too well. Let's see. Anyone else? Kareem Hunt against the Chargers. That might be a bad matchup right there. Let's see right here. Anyone else? Like I said, Jamal Williams against Carolina might not be a good one right there. Jerick McKinnon, start him on your own risk. I really don't trust him too much. Frank Gore against Denver on Thursday night. I really don't like that one at all. Anyone else? Tevin Coleman. I really don't like him going forward because Devontae Freeman looks like he's starting to take over again. Lamar Miller against Jacksonville. That's a bad matchup right there. Bilal Powell against New Orleans. That's a bad matchup. Anyone else? Let's go last ones right here. That's a wide receiver. Excuse me. But I think that might be it. Derrick Henry against San Francisco. I really don't trust that matchup too. San Francisco's defense has been playing well. And same with Giovanni Bernard versus Minnesota. I don't really trust that either. But let's see if we could go wide receivers. Let's go. Any bad matchups right here? Mike Evans against Atlanta. Mike Evans really hasn't been playing well. Let's see who else. Josh Gordon against Baltimore. Baltimore has a solid defense, and I think they're going to put pressure on Kaiser, which is going to force him to make mistakes. I know Baltimore's defense secondary really hasn't been playing too well, but I think that defensive line is what's going to cause Kaiser to pretty much struggle, and like I said, throw a couple interceptions. I don't like DeAndre Hopkins' matchup against Jacksonville. Anyone else? Like I said, any of the Denver Broncos receivers besides Demaryius Thomas, I don't like going tonight. Kelvin Benjamin against Miami, don't trust that one. Doug Baldwin versus the Rams, don't really trust that one either. T.Y. Hilton against Denver, don't like that matchup. Let's see. Anyone else? I think that might be it for receiver matchups I don't like. Yeah, I think that might be it, honestly. Let's see. Anyone else? I don't like Amari Cooper as a wide receiver either way, so him going against Dallas, don't really trust. Don't trust AJ Green going against Minnesota. And actually, yeah, that's it for receivers. Let's see. Tight ends, do we have anyone? Delaney Walker versus San Francisco, don't like that matchup. San Francisco always had solid linebackers, so you know they're going to be ready. Julius Thomas versus Buffalo. Julius Thomas really isn't a part of the offense all too much, so I don't like that one. Hunter Henry against Kansas City, I think that's going to be a good matchup. Same with Jason Witten versus Oakland. Jared Cook with Dallas might be a good matchup right there. Jimmy Graham against the Rams defense, I like that one. Njoku versus Baltimore, the Cleveland tight end, really don't like that matchup. Just has to do with more Deshaun Kaiser not thinking he's going to play well. And that's actually it for tight ends right there. So we're actually going to wrap up this segment. Next up, we're going to do who to start, who to sit for each position. We'll talk a little bit about the players I mentioned for bad matchups, but stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. For that last segment, we actually talked about Aaron Rodgers, what we think of him coming back this week. We also talked about, who else did we talk? We talked about pretty much Devontae Adams, Jordy Nelson, Jamal Williams, pretty much what their fantasy outlook is going to be like once Rodgers comes back this Sunday against Carolina. And then we also talked about players this week whose matchups I really don't like. But for this segment, like how we always do for the last one, we're going to do who to start and who to sit. And we'll pretty much just go from there. So, yeah, let's start it off against Case Keenum against Cincinnati. Oh, yeah. By the way, we're going to start with the quarterbacks first like we always do. But Case Keenum going against Cincinnati, I'm going to start him right there. I think he's going to have a big game. Same with Phillip Rivers against Kansas City. I'm starting him. And I think he's going to have a big game also. I mean, both quarterbacks have been playing well, especially Phillip Rivers. So I think those are must-starts right there. I'm sitting Jared Goff against Seattle. I think Seattle's defense is going to cause some problems for him. I'm sitting Nick Foles against the Giants. I'm not ready to throw Nick Foles out there and I don't think he's going to play well. Starting Matt Ryan against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's defense has been pretty suspect so far this season. Let's see, Cam Newton against Green Bay. I'm starting him. Don't think Green Bay's defense is all too good. And I think Cam Newton's going to have a good fantasy football game. And Ben Roethlisberger against New England, that's a game pretty not... It's like it's a tricky game to decide right there for fantasy players because New England's always going to game plan for their the Steelers' best players like how they always do. But I'm going to start Ben Roethlisberger still. I think New England isn't going to be able to handle Antonio Brown. I'm sitting Derek Carr against Dallas. Derek Carr really hasn't been playing well, and I feel like if you're in the playoffs and you're pretty much depending on him, you're not going to do too well. Jameis Winston against Atlanta. I'm sitting Jameis. Think he's going to go for a couple of picks. I'm starting Jimmy Garoppolo against Tennessee. Think Garoppolo's been playing well. Think he's going to play even better against Tennessee. Aaron Rodgers against Carolina. I'm starting him. Whenever Aaron Rodgers is back, that's pretty much the best quarterback in football, so I'm starting him. Russell Wilson against the Rams. I'm sitting him. Tom Brady against Pittsburgh. I'm going to start him. Think he's going to come back from that Miami game, play even better against the Steelers. I'm starting Matt Stafford against Chicago. This is one of those games where Matt Stafford's going to go for 3 touchdowns and at least 350 yards. Let's see, Dak Prescott against Oakland. I'm definitely starting him. Dak Prescott's coming off of a big game against the Giants, and Oakland's got an even worse defense than New York, so I think Dak Prescott's going to play well in this one. Let's see, who else do we got? Kirk Cousins against Arizona. I'm sitting him. Don't think he's going to do well against Arizona. Last week against the Chargers, he only threw for about 151 yards, 1 pick, 1 touchdown, so not good numbers from him. And let's see, last up for the quarterbacks, sitting Alex Smith against the Chargers. Don't think Alex Smith is going to play well. He didn't do too well against Oakland's defense last week, so it gives me no reason to think he'll do well this week. Andy Dalton versus Minnesota. I'm definitely sitting him. There's no without a doubt. Andy Dalton's thrown a couple interceptions. Drew Brees against the Jets. Obviously, that's a must start right there. And that's actually going to be it for quarterbacks. Let's see if we got any good streaming options for this week. If you need a quarterback because obviously someone went down, like say Carson Wentz or anyone like that, I mean, I guess you could look at Cutler. Had a big game against the... Actually, I wouldn't go with Cutler this week. They're playing in Buffalo. That's probably going to be a big snow game right there. Mitch Trubisky against Detroit, maybe. Let's see, anyone else really? There's really no good... Everyone's got a bad matchup this week, so it's Tyrod Taylor against Miami maybe if he starts, but that's pretty much it right there. Everyone else has a pretty bad matchup this week, so if you pretty much stick with the quarterback you got, whether or not I said to start him or sit him. As for the running backs, Jordan Howard against Detroit, I'm starting him. I'm starting Alvin Kamara coming back off of a concussion. Last week he probably broke some hearts of some fantasy football coaches, players, whatever you want to call ourselves. But if you ended up winning last week in your playoff week with Kamara not really playing, then go ahead, throw him out here this week. There's redemption. But Kenyon Drake against Buffalo, I'm starting him. He's been on a little bit of a hot streak. Let's see. He had 24 points against New England, 25 against Denver, 11 versus New England. Had a bad game against Tampa Bay with 2.6. He did have 18 versus Carolina and 14 against Oakland. And before that was when J.J. was playing, so that's why I only read up to Oakland. But I'm starting Kenyon Drake, sitting Rex Burkhead against Pittsburgh. Let's see, Doug Martin, I'm sitting him for the rest of the season. Sitting Deion Lewis against Pittsburgh, sitting LeGarrette Blount. And let's see, next up for running backs, I'm starting Marshawn Lynch versus Dallas. Think he'll have a decent game. Starting Carlos Hyde against Tennessee. I'm going to start Todd Gurley, obviously, against Seattle. Kareem Hunt, really don't like that matchup, but that's pretty much a must-start if you got him on your team. Sitting James White versus Pittsburgh. Let's see, anyone else? Sitting C.J. Anderson versus Indianapolis. Starting Mark Ingram versus the Jets. Sitting Orleans Darkwood versus Philly. I'm going to start LaShawn McCoy against Miami. I think he's going to get the ball a lot, so he's going to pretty much rack up at least 100 yards. Starting Devontae Freeman against Tampa Bay. I'm going to sit Jamal Williams against Carolina. I'm going to start J.J. versus the Giants. All right, I'm going to sit Joe Mixon versus the Vikings. Sitting Marlon Mack versus the Denver Broncos. Sitting Christian McCaffrey versus the Green Bay Packers. Don't think he's going to have that good of a game. Let's see who else do we got out here. I'm sitting both Titans running backs. I'm going to start Jerick McKinnon versus Cincinnati. I'm going to sit Frank Gore versus Denver. Going to start Melvin Gordon versus Kansas City. Think he's going to have a big game right here. I'm going to start Alex Collins versus Cleveland. Alex Collins has been playing well. Let me see if I can pull up his stats real quick. He's been averaging around 10 points so far this season in fantasy. He had 24 against Pittsburgh, 24 against Detroit. Against Houston, he had 14. Against Green Bay, he had 17. So that's 1, 2, yeah. His last 4 games, he played extremely well, and I think he's going to do extremely well against Cleveland too. So we'll see how it all ends up. But again, if you got him, start him. Let's see. Any other running backs right here we got? Next up, we got Lamar Miller against Jacksonville. I'm sitting him. Don't think he's going to do anything against Jacksonville's defense. Latavius Murray against Cincinnati. I'd start him too. I think he's probably going to go for a touchdown on the ground. Jerick McKinnon could pick one up through the air. Danny Woodhead against Cleveland. Let's see how he did last week. He's a decent PPR back, but really not starting him. He really hasn't gotten back into the fold of things. Duke Johnson Jr. versus Baltimore. I think that could be a little sleeper type of streaming type of player right there. Bilal Powell versus New Orleans. I'm sitting him. Le'Veon Bell, obviously that's a must start no matter who he's playing. Buck Allen against Cleveland. I think I'd start him too. The Ravens are doing well to get production out of both of their running backs, even though it's by committee. Amir Abdullah versus Chicago. I'm sitting Amir Abdullah. I'm starting Leonard Fournette versus Houston. I'm going to start Alfred. No, I'm going to sit Alfred Morris versus Oakland. I'm going to start Rod Smith versus Oakland. I think Rod Smith is going to play well this week. Isaiah Crowell versus Baltimore. I'm going to sit him. Let's see. Aaron Jones versus Carolina. I'm sitting him. Is it Alex Jones? Aaron Jones. I'm sitting him. Like I said, I'm sitting Derrick Henry. Let's see. Giovanni Bernard against Minnesota. I'm sitting him too. That's pretty much it for running backs. Let's see if we got any good streaming options this week. I know I mentioned Duke Johnson, but anyone else? Kerwin Williams against Washington might be a good option. Same with, why am I drawing a blank on his name? Jonathan Stewart. Yeah, Jonathan Stewart, but Tariq Cohen maybe too. I mean, he's been doing all right, but those are pretty much it right there for streaming options for running backs. As for wide receivers, I'm starting Michael Thomas against the Jets. I'm starting Antonio Brown, obviously, against New England. Starting Devontae Adams versus Carolina. I'm sitting Josh Gordon versus Baltimore. Let's see who else. I'm going to sit Cooper Kupp versus Seattle. I'm going to start Brandon Cooks versus Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's got a terrible secondary. I'm going to sit Mike Evans versus Atlanta. I don't think he's going to do too well. DeAndre Hopkins against Jacksonville. I think that's a sit right there, even though he's been playing well. Jacksonville's not going to let TJ Yates, Tom Savage, whoever it is that's back there throw for anything. Stephon Diggs, I'm going to... it's kind of a tough one right there. I guess I go starting Stephon Diggs against Cincinnati. Like I said, I'm sitting Emmanuel Sanders. Let's see, who else? Starting Julio Jones against Tampa Bay. Starting Marvin Jones versus Chicago. Sitting Kelvin Benjamin versus Miami. Sitting Kenny Stills versus Buffalo. Anyone else? I'm going to sit Doug Baldwin versus the Rams. Going to start Adam Thielen versus Cincinnati. Starting Golden Tate versus Chicago. Starting Demaryius Thomas versus Indianapolis. Sitting Corey Coleman against Baltimore. Let's see, who else do we got going on here? I'm going to sit T.Y. Hilton versus Denver, starting Larry Fitzgerald versus Washington. And let's see, who else do we got going on? Robbie Anderson versus New Orleans. No Josh McCown, so I'm sitting Robbie Anderson. Not sure how he's going to play with Bryce Petty or whoever it is that they throw in at quarterback. I'm going to start Mohamed Sanu against Tampa Bay. He's been playing well. No Chris Hogan against Pittsburgh. Devontae Parker versus Buffalo. I'm sitting him. It's going to be a snowy game, I think. Alshon Jeffrey versus the Giants. I think Nick Foles is going to look for him a lot since that's the top receiver. So I'm starting Alshon. Starting Keenan Allen versus Kansas City. Sitting Jordy Nelson this week against Carolina. Let's see. Michael Crabtree against Dallas. I'm starting him. I'm going to sit Tyreek Hill versus the Chargers. Let's see who else. Sterling Shepard versus Philly. I'm sitting him. Marquise Lee against Houston. I'm starting him. Devin Funchess versus Green Bay. I'm starting him also. Will Fuller, drop him if you got him in your team. Juju Smith-Schuster, that might be someone to start this week because I'm sure New England's going to try and double up Antonio Brown and pretty much try and put a spy on, or a little guy on Le'Veon Bell. So I think Juju Smith-Schuster could go for a big game. I'm sitting A.J. Green versus Minnesota. Sitting Amari Cooper versus Dallas. I'm going to sit Rashard Matthews versus San Francisco. And this is it for the receivers right here. I'm going to start Dez Bryant against Oakland. Sitting Sammy Watkins versus Seattle. Obviously, I'm sitting Deshaun Jackson. Sitting Randall Cobb. And if you need a good streaming option, go with D.D. Westbrook against Houston. I picked him up in one of my leagues for my semifinals and playoffs. I didn't want to start Josh Gordon or Lamar Miller in my flex, so I thought D.D. Westbrook might be a good option. As for tight ends, I'm starting Jack Doyle versus Denver. Starting Travis Kelce versus the Chargers. I'm dropping Greg Olsen if you got him. Let's see, any other tight ends we got going on here. I'm sitting Delaney Walker versus San Francisco. I'm starting Rob Gronkowski versus Pittsburgh. Starting Cameron Brate against Atlanta. I think if anyone's going to do well, it's going to be him. Sitting Julius Thomas versus Buffalo. Starting Hunter Henry against KC. Let's see who else. Evan Ingram against Philly. I'm going to start him. I think Eli Manning's going to look for him more and more. Starting Jason Witten against Oakland. Starting Jared Cook against Dallas. Let's see what else we got going on. I'm sitting I'll start Charles Clay versus Miami. Charles Clay always seems to have good games against his former team. I'm sitting Njoku versus Baltimore. I'm sitting Jimmy Graham versus the Rams. Let's see. Any other tight ends before we wrap up that position? Zach Ertz versus New York against the Giants. I'm starting him. I'm also starting Kyle Rudolph versus Cincinnati. And let's see, any other tight end position? Nope, that might be it. Vernon Davis is a good streaming option, I guess, versus Arizona. If anyone's going to get the ball against them, it's going to be him. And let's see, anyone on the waiver wire, really. Austin Hooper might be a good streaming option because he's playing Tampa Bay's terrible defense, too. And let's see, now we pretty much let's go top 5 kickers, and then we'll look at top 5 defenses this week. So Will Lutz versus the Jets, that's a kicker you need to start. Same with Justin Tucker. Let's see who else. I think Boswell versus New England is going to be a good start. Steelers kick a lot of field goals. Steven Gostkowski against Pittsburgh. And for my final kicker, let's go with Matt Bryant versus Tampa Bay. I think those are my top 5 kickers this week. Let's go for defenses right now. Let's see, top 5 defenses this week. I'm gonna go Minnesota. This isn't in any order either. This is just pretty much the top 5 defense who I think I'm going to do well. The top 5 who I think I'm going to do the best. All right, so Minnesota against Cincinnati, I think that's a good play right there. Philly against the Giants, I think that's a good play also. Jacksonville, obviously, against Houston. Let's see, any other defense? We got 2 more defenses to go through. Let's see. This is a bit difficult right here. There's not too many good matchups. Arizona against Washington, I feel like that's going to be good. And let's see. Let's head over to the waiver wire we got right here. New Orleans versus the Jets. Actually, Baltimore versus Cleveland. That's going to round out my top 5 right there. I think Baltimore's going to have a good game against the Baltimore's defense. Is going to have a good game against this Cleveland offense. So that's actually going to wrap it up for today's show. First off, we did our winners and losers. Then we talked about the Thursday night football game. We talked about Aaron Rodgers coming back. And then we did our starting and who to start, who to sit for our last segment like we usually do. So like I said, that's going to wrap up today's show. This is the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Tapia, and we'll talk to you later. Stay tuned.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.